Welcome to the Mean Lady Talking Podcast. This is the podcast that tackles tough questions about relationships, life, love, and loss. It may not be the advice you want, but it's probably the advice you need. And now here's your host, grief therapist, motivational speaker, relationship expert, best-selling author, and attorney, the not really mean lady herself, Susan J. Elliott.
Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, host of the Mean Lady Talking Podcast, and today we're going to continue on with Codependency 101. And I know that I've done other podcasts on codependency. I know that I've done videos on it, but I ended talking about when we give and give and give to another person and we don't expect anything in return, it amounts to emotional manipulation. And the other person senses it, and they might not even have the conscious thought, oh, I'm being manipulated here. But they run away anyway. And the reason why codependents give and give and give is because they don't think that just being them is enough. You have to be able to walk into a relationship and say, this is me, I'm a great person. And you need to appreciate that without me doing over-the-top giving. And if you don't know how to do that, then you have an issue. I talked about my husband saying that he was bringing the VCR back because I wasn't going to buy him. And if you remember the story, I had nothing to do with the purchase of that VCR. It was all his idea. We went to his parents. They had the VCR. He was the one who brought it up. He was the one who went to Sears, and he was the one who brought it home. I had absolutely nothing to do that. But because he used the words buy him, and this is somebody who love bombed me in the beginning. He bought me cars, he bought me leather jackets, he paid my school bills, he did all kinds of things for me. And then when I got on my feet and I was doing things for him, he was thinking that I was buying him. But with the VCR, I had done nothing of the sort. But because I thought that there might have been some over-the-top giving, I didn't say anything because I was A, gaslighted, and B, crazily codependent, didn't know what to say. I didn't know what the hell was going on. Anyway, people will rebel against the giving and giving and giving. When you do something for someone without any expectation of any kind of return, it's a method of control. It's about doing something for someone without expecting anything in return. And what you think you're going to get back is just their interest in you and their appreciation and their gratitude. And that's exactly what you don't get. Because the over-the-top giving without any expectation in return is a form of emotional manipulation, and it's a method of control. It's like you're controlling them, you're trying to control them, and most of the time it doesn't work. You're trying to control them so that they will continue to care about you. But it doesn't work, and people can sense that they're being manipulated. And even if the words never cross their brain, I'm being manipulated here, they rebel against it anyway. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to read you some, not all, but some, characteristics of codependence by Melody Beattie. And Melody Beattie wrote the classic seminal book on codependency, Codependent No More. If you're a codependent, you are most likely a caretaker. Now, I just had a discussion in the Facebook group that caregiving and caretaking are two very different things. Caregiving is when you are a healthy person and you're doing, like I did for my husband Michael when he was terminally ill. I turned myself inside out for him, but I also took care of myself when I needed to. I did for him what I knew absolutely he would do for me. And when I was in a near fatal car accident and I was in the hospital for 5 weeks, and when I came home, I had to go back to law school. I was trying to graduate. Then I had to study for the bar. I was in really, really bad shape. He helped me all the time. He did and did and did and did for me. So when he got sick, I was more than willing to turn myself inside out for him. But I also was very aware of the fact that I needed to take care of myself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of someone else. And active codependents just don't get that. They will drive themselves into the ground. And that's caretaking, not caregiving. Melody Beattie says that codependents think and feel responsible for other people's feelings, actions, choices, wants, needs, well-being, lack of well-being, and ultimate destiny. That's a whole lot of responsibility, okay? And codependents tend to feel anxious and guilty when other people have problems. They try to anticipate other people's needs, and then they wonder why people don't do the same for them. And it's because they're with people who are takers. Codependents feel safest when giving because they feel like, well, I'm doing something that makes me worthwhile. They can't just be who they are and have that be worthwhile. They think they have to be doing, and that makes them feel harried and pressured. And then after a while, they feel angry, they feel victimized, they feel unappreciated, they feel used, but they actually put themselves in that situation. Codependents have low self-worth. And I remember when I went into therapy, my therapist said to me, you don't have low self-esteem, you have no self-esteem. I think I was like on a minus scale. Most codependents tend to come from troubled or dysfunctional families. And yet they'll deny that their family was troubled or dysfunctional, and they'll blame themselves for everything. Their low self-esteem causes them to reject compliments. And my therapist told me, if somebody gives you a compliment, say thank you. That's it. Say thank you. That's it. Just say thank you. Don't say, oh no. Somebody could say, oh, you have such a lovely smile. And you say, oh no, I don't. My teeth are crooked. I need this. I need that. You are basically taking someone's compliment and throwing it in the toilet, and you're telling them you don't know what you're talking about. It's very insulting. When somebody gives you a compliment, just say thank you. I don't care how uncomfortable it makes you feel. Just say thank you. Codependents are afraid of making mistakes. I know that I was very afraid of making mistakes, and I was very afraid of admitting mistakes because I felt that I wasn't enough. And now if I wasn't enough and I made a mistake, oh my goodness, that led me to be double not enough. Codependents don't care if they're wanted. They want to be needed. They need to be needed. They tend to put their thoughts and feelings out of the way because they are afraid and they feel guilty. They become very rigid. They become very controlled. Melody Beatty said that codependents tend to be obsessive. And in Getting Past Your Breakup, I talk about this. Part of grief is anxiety, and part of anxiety is obsession. And if you're feeling obsessive, I tell people, do some crafts. Go to a hobby store and just go up and down the aisles. You will find something. I don't care if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're young, if you're old, no matter what you are, you will find something that catches your eye and goes, oh yeah, I would like to do that. Somebody in my current boot camp said that I had said something about a jigsaw puzzle. I love jigsaw puzzles. And I will force myself to be unplugged for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. This morning, I was unplugged. I got up about 6:30. I made myself a cup of coffee and a cup of tea. All last year, I went through hell with my stomach, which I've talked about in some of the Watts Family Murders case. I went through hell with my stomach, and I started drinking Bigelow Calm Stomach. It's ginger and peach, and it is so delicious. And I've tried other brands of ginger peach, or I've tried a brand that has ginger, another that has peach. Nothing comes close to Bigelow. Bigelow, you're welcome to sponsor my podcast, but they don't. So I'm just going to throw this out there. Bigelow Calm Stomach, started using that regularly because I couldn't keep anything down. It really helped me. And I still don't know why, but it did. It really helped me a lot. So to this day, I eventually started being able to have coffee again. So now I have a half a cup of coffee in the morning and a cup of tea, and that's become my routine. But this morning I got up, I made myself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and I stayed unplugged for 4 hours. I went through my papers, I went through some of the things that I need to do for the weekend, and I didn't turn on my phone, I didn't turn on my computer, I didn't turn on my television, I didn't turn on anything. I was just sitting there. And first I went through what I needed to do for the weekend, and then I did 2 hours straight of reading fiction, and it was wonderful. And I kept thinking, okay, well, I've been unplugged for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. When I made 4 hours, I was really happy. I used to be able to polish off some pretty complex novels in a day. And now, to force myself to sit there and read for 2 hours, I really am upset that I've let my attention span go to that degree. But the other day I thought about it and I thought I have got to do 2 hours of reading every single day and then go to 3 and go to 4. It's really a goal of mine and I have it all written out on paper. I've worked with clients on this. I've worked with boot campers on this. And when I work with them, I do myself. I don't ask anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do. And I have an entire spreadsheet as to how I'm going to work up to 8 hours a day of reading. Not every day, but some days I would like to spend a Saturday where I have no clients, no boot camp calls, nothing, and just read for 8 straight hours. I used to do it all the time. I don't do it anymore. And I really want to get back to that. So anyway, if you're obsessive, it's a good thing to do some crafty things. Go to a craft store. And if you have an independent mom and pop craft store in your neighborhood, in your city, or even if you have to travel a little bit to it, please, please, please patronize the independent shop. Don't go to a chain coffee shop, a chain bookstore, a chain hobby shop. Go to an independent one. Please help out the little guy and the little woman who are trying to make a go of it. It's really, really important. Please avoid those big, giant chains. I know in New York City, if you look in Manhattan, used to have a corner store, a little mom and pop corner store. Now it's all banks and Starbucks and things like that because they're the only ones that can afford the rent. If you stop patronizing them, they'll have to go away and mom and pop will be able to come in and afford the rents again. Anyway, that's my little spiel on that. But go to a hobby shop. Even if you can't find an independent one, go somewhere and go up and down the aisles and pick something out that you'd like to do. You just look at something that you would really like to do and get the supplies and go home and put on meditation music, put on relaxation music, and sit there and do your little crafts. It really helps with obsession. It really helps with anxiety. Codependents are so obsessive and they're so anxious a lot of time. And they're always talking about other people's problems. They're always worrying about other people. Stop worrying. Deal with your own stuff. And then they wonder, why don't I have any energy? Because you're running around cleaning up after everybody else and not dealing with your own self-care. And this is something that I did when I was taking care of Michael. When I was doing caregiving and not caretaking, I would go, okay, I need to spend 2 hours just potting my plants, bringing my plants out on the deck and giving them all new potting soil. Or I just need to go do crossword puzzles for an hour. I need to do logic problems for an hour. I need to do crocheting for an hour. That's what healthy people do. They take care of themselves. They don't sit there and obsess over other people and get anxious over other people, and then they do nothing with that. They just run around like chickens without heads. Codependents are very controlling. They've lived through so many events with people that were out of control that they have everything tightly clamped down. They become afraid to let other people be who they are or to allow events to just happen naturally. They're always trying to change the course of time of events of other people. That's why they don't let other people become responsible for what they're responsible for. Because the whole thing is going to go to hell if they just taking a hands-off approach. The whole world is going to blow up, according to them. So they try to control events and other people. They do that with helplessness, with guilt, coercion, with threats, with advice giving, with manipulation or domination, and all the above. And you could say, how could a person be both helpless and in control at the same time? And many talented codependents can pull that off without a hitch. But then they eventually fail in their efforts, and then they either become angry or they provoke someone else's anger. And everybody is off to the races. Now, here's a big one. Codependents live their life in denial. And I've had people in my boot camps, and I've had clients, and I've had people at seminars and all workshops and all kinds of things come and deny to my face that everything that they've described to me, which is codependency on acid, and then they'll say, oh, I'm not a codependent. Or I don't like that word. Oh, it's just a pop culture word. It doesn't really mean anything. No, it does mean something. And there are definitions, and that's what Melody Beattie said, that codependents are experts at denial. They pretend that things are not as bad as they really are, and they keep telling themselves things will get better, and they just pretend that things that are really bad that are happening are not really happening. No, they are happening. And many codependents think they're going crazy, but they feel like they're going crazy because they live their life in denial, and if you live your life in denial, you can't actually face up to what's actually going on. Codependents can become very dependent. Now, I talked about how there was this debate raging in the psychological community about putting codependency in the DSM, and there is a school of thought that it belongs in the personality disorders and access to, and it certainly does not. And nobody's asked me, but I wish they would ask me because I would tell them, no, it does not, absolutely does not belong on access to. When I was doing psychiatric evaluations, if I had a codependent and they weren't in a major depressive episode, which most of them are because codependents carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. They don't know how to say no. They don't know how to turn things down. They're always rescuing. They're always helping. They're always doing this. They're always doing that. And then they wind up in the emergency room going, I'm so depressed. I want to throw myself off the roof. I don't know why. Well, everybody that they're running around rescuing and controlling and helping is sitting home, lounging about, like not a care in the world. Well, the codependent's up in the emergency room going, help me, help me, help me. And if they were having a major depressive episode, I would give them that diagnosis. But if they weren't, they were just falling apart at the seams, I would give them an adjustment disorder, which is a very general catch-all, doesn't mean a lot, and tell them to go to a Codependence Anonymous meeting or an Al-Anon meeting and stop being a codependent. Like, that's what I would tell them. I mean, there's only so much you can do when you're being asked in the middle of the night to go out and evaluate somebody. So as long as they weren't suicidal, as long as they were not majorly depressed, and they weren't having a major depressive episode, I would say, I'm going to give you adjustment disorder. That means your insurance company will pay for this visit, and I suggest that you go home, get some rest, get some sleep, and stop rescuing. Go to Al-Anon, go to Codependence Anonymous, buy Melody Beatty's books, and please start taking care of yourself. Codependents don't feel happy. They don't feel content. They don't feel peace. They look for happiness outside themselves. They latch on to people that they think can provide happiness, but most of these other people are empty vessels who couldn't provide anything. They couldn't provide an afternoon tea if their life depended on it. Bigelow tea, calm stomach. I'm so worried that Bigelow's going to stop making this tea because they don't carry it in my supermarket. I have to get it on Amazon, and I order it a few times a month. So I'm just so nervous that this is going to... So I want the whole world to be drinking this tea so it does not ever stop being made. Anyway, we go back to the tea. So the people that they're worried about wouldn't do a thing for them. Codependents don't really believe deep down inside that other people can love them. They center their lives around other people and try to make themselves indispensable. But what they actually do is, it goes back to the manipulation. By trying to make themselves indispensable, they're actually manipulating other people, and other people don't like to be manipulated. Many codependents have fear of abandonment, and when the person leaves because they feel manipulated, the codependent's like, see, I knew it. I knew everybody leaves. One thing that I talk about in getting back out there is the standards and compatibility inventory. Codependents don't sit around and worry about, do I like this person? Do I love this person? What's the deal? Is this person compatible with the way I want to live my life? They don't do any of that. It's not that any of us are taught to do that, and I try to shove that down people's throats. You have to evaluate other people to see how well they fit into your life. But codependents are worse than anyone else. When I try to tell people about the standards of compatibility inventory, they want to skip right over it. And it's because it's going to make them use their discretion. And they don't really have any discretion. I have to teach them discretion. They don't take the time to figure out if they love other people, if they like other people, or why. They just center their lives around people who need their help, people who are fixer-uppers. And houses should be fixer-uppers. Cars can be fixer-uppers. People should not be fixer-uppers. Find someone who is an equal, not somebody who is somebody you need to bail out. fix up, invest in, all of that stuff. Codependents will tolerate abuse and somehow blame themselves for bringing on that abuse, because it's usually not just this relationship where they're being abused, but in many other relationships they're being abused. Melody Beattie said that codependents have very poor communication skills. They blame, they threaten, they coerce, they beg, they bribe, they advise. They don't say what they mean what they say, and they don't know what they mean. Say what you mean what you say without being mean. And they don't know how to do any of that. They don't know how to say what they mean. They don't know how to mean what they say. And they certainly, when they finally blow, they don't know how to do it without being mean. They'll be raving and carrying on and saying all kinds of things. The biggest deal with codependents is they have very weak boundaries. One thing that Melody Beattie said is the definition of healthy relationships is I begin and end one place and you begin and end another place. Codependents don't know that. They are enmeshed with other people. They take on the responsibilities and the issues of other people, and they try to solve them, sometimes without the other person even being involved in the solution. They'll be like, don't worry about it, I took care of it. Oh yeah, I paid that for you, don't worry about it. And they expect to be appreciated. Many times the other person's going, what? You did what? Boundaries are so bad. They don't know that they begin and end one place and that other people begin and end another place. They just don't know it. They just don't get it. They complain, they blame, and they try to control while they are running around, putting their nose where it doesn't belong. And they might say, well, they let me. Yeah, but you shouldn't have been doing it in the first place, whether or not they'll let you. I mean, if somebody came into my life today and said, oh, I want to fix all your problems, I'd be like, okay, knock yourself out. Let me know how that goes. I'm not going to be jumping up and down saying, don't do that. I would think that there was something wrong with them, and I don't think I'd want to be their friend. Codependents also have a major lack of trust. They don't trust themselves. They don't trust their feelings. They don't trust their decisions. They don't trust other people. But they do trust untrustworthy people. I tell people all the time, trust has got to be earned. You don't just walk in and say, and I've seen this in court so many times. I'll be sitting there. So the judge will ask them, why did you do this for that person? It could be in small claims. It could be in family court. It could be in a restraining order. It could be this, that. And the judge is trying to get into the facts of the case, trying to figure it out. And the codependent will say, well, I trusted them. And the judge will say, well, how long did you know them? Oh, about a day. You can't trust somebody in a day. And they'll do their little codependent, I'm so trusting. I'm such a good person. I just love everybody. And the judge is going, So they don't trust themselves. They don't trust their feelings. They don't trust their decisions. But who do they trust? Untrustworthy people. Okie dokie. And then they get very angry because codependents feel taken advantage of because they are. But they're the ones who set themselves up like that. I mean, they feel scared, they feel hurt, they feel angry, and they live with other people who are scared and hurt and angry. And when you have people living together who are scared and hurt and angry, all you're going to have is one giant mess of fear and hurt and anger. That's what you're going to have. And it's just no way to live. Codependents can be very overly responsible. They can be under-responsible. And one thing that I work with very hard in my codependents, either my one-on-one clients or in my boot camps, is overdeveloped defense mechanisms, because most of them have overdeveloped them to the max. And I will have somebody who might be equally overly responsible and under-responsible. They could be overly responsible for other people and under-responsible for themselves. And it's this dichotomy that just doesn't make any sense. As codependency goes on, codependents have a tendency to fall apart. They fall apart, their relationships fall apart, their lives fall apart. Things happen. It takes you to your knees. It's what happens in any disease or disorder. And one of the things that I haven't touched on is codependents get into relationships with people with personality disorders. And this isn't something that Melody Beattie has talked about. And I don't like the word empath, and I've told other people that. I mean, I'm a healthy person and I'm empathic. As an attorney, I'm empathic. As a therapist, I'm empathic. So I know that I'm not personality disordered. And I've taken people out of my life who can't give me any empathy, who can't give me any sympathy, who can't be there for me when I'm sick. And I've had to say to people, I'm sorry, but I was there for you when you needed me, and you were not there for me when I needed you, and therefore this relationship needs to end. And a lot of times people get very angry. So I'm a healthy person and I'm empathic, but I object to the word empath because it sounds kind of cuddly nice. Oh, we're all empathic, because empathic is usually a hallmark of a healthy person. And I think that what it's not is a good description of people who are partners of those who have personality disorders. I think it's more like codependent, because you have to be codependent. If you are pathologically narcissistic, and I just did a thing on the difference between a narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis and the term pathologically narcissistic, chances are that your partner is going to be codependent. Conversely, if your ex-partner is a narcissist, chances are you're a codependent. Many times that's the dynamic, plain and simple. Because narcissists need somebody to do for them because they're so self-centered. So the codependent does everything for them, and the dynamic works out perfectly for the narcissist, not for the codependent. The codependent is like crawling away from the burning wreck of the relationship like the hair is on fire. I have seen such emotional, mental, financial, and physical abuse heaped on codependents from personality disordered persons. And I used to say, codependency kills, and I don't say that lightly. I have been there many times when I was doing psychiatric services, and I would go to evaluate somebody who had been in the hospital because they attempted suicide. What I would uncover is a codependent who almost took themselves down for their codependency. They either couldn't handle the end of a relationship, or they couldn't handle a relationship that was slowly killing them, so they decided that they were just going to end it once and for all anyway. So when I say codependency kills, the progression of codependency is just like any other disease, like alcoholism or drug addiction, where it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. I believe, and my sister, who was or is, I don't have a relation with her, so I don't know what her current status is, a social worker, we both agreed that my mother was a borderline. And I set boundaries with my mother in a healthy, loving way. You have to change your dynamic with people. And I couldn't just push my mother out of my life, but I had to set boundaries with her, healthy boundaries. I couldn't say to my mother, look, I am in this horrible relationship with my husband because he is so much like you. He's a gaslighter, he's personality disordered, and he's abusive just like you, and blames me for everything just like you. I didn't say that. I didn't say now I'm in all this relationship trouble because I took after you, and now I'm going to break the spell, and I'm going to go on and be healthy, and before I do, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about you, and exactly what the problem is, and exactly all the strife that you caused me in my life, and you should be ashamed of that. Of course, I didn't say any of that. You don't have to hit people over the head with your recovery, and if you're a healthy person, you know that. You don't do it. Codependent borderline mothers, I believe, are the Mount Olympus of codependency. That there is so much to try to break away from, that it's really difficult. But I did it with my mother. I was able to put boundaries in place that she didn't even realize were in place. I never went to her. I never read her the Riot Act. I never told her exactly how it was going to be. I went to Al-Anon. I talked about things. I talked about, well, you know, my mother said this, and then I said that. I went to therapy. My mother said this, and I said that. I went to Codependence Anonymous. My mother said this, I said that, and I learned. I learned and learned and learned. And then I was able to start choosing people who were better than my mother, who were not abusive, who were not cheaters, who were not liars. Not that my mother was a liar, but I could tell you stories all day long about my mother. And I remember one time she was in my house sweeping my floors. I didn't ask her to. This is my mother. She couldn't sit still. So she gets up, she starts sweeping my kitchen floor, which really didn't need it. And I was sitting there reading the paper, and she said, you know, I have a bad back, and you sat there and watched me sweep your floor. And I sat there and I thought, in healthy relationships, somebody will ask you if you need them to sweep the floor in your house. They won't just pick up a broom and start sweeping. This is the boundary issue. And when you are an active, raging codependent, you don't know that this person has just crashed your boundaries and now they're yelling at you, and that's not okay. Sitting there that day, I knew it was not okay. I knew that what my mother was saying and doing was not okay. That's how recovered I was. Healthy people don't sweep the floor and then castigate you for letting them do it. But when you've grown up with that, you become like that. I would have jumped up and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, But that day, I sat there looking at her like she was out of her mind. Why? Because she was out of her mind. It's amazing that any of us get out alive of these parental relationships that are so crazy. I think I had a half a brain cell left when I finally figured out that I needed to change the dance with my mother, and I needed to stop letting her do this crazy nonsense. So when my mother said that to me, I said, what are you talking about? And she looked at me. I'd never asked the question before. I said, what are you talking about? And she just repeated what she just said. And I said, if you wanted me to sweep my floor, you should have mentioned it. But don't sweep the floor and then get upset because I didn't do it. Because if I had done it, it would have been wrong, just like it would have been wrong with my husband. Oh, you left streaks on the floor because you knew that I would never, blah, blah, blah. All nonsense. Anyway, I have a lot more. But one of the really important things that you have to understand in codependency recovery is that you have to figure out who owns what. Just like in the last episode, I talked about taking the kids to see his grandmother. Where was he in this? I never thought, this is not my responsibility. This is yours. When my mother decided to sweep my floor, I would have never thought, well, why did you do that? I never had the ability to question these crazy people who were coming at me with these crazy accusations. You don't care about my grandmother. And the next time he called with the exact same thing, oh, you didn't take the kids to see my grandmother. And I said, they're your kids and your grandmother. You take them, and hung up the phone. I couldn't see his face, but God, I wish I had. I wish I'd been able to say that in person, but then I wouldn't have been able to hang up the phone. It was a complete change from the way I had behaved with him for 15 years. One of the things you must do as a recovering codependent is to figure out who owns what. Is this my problem? No. He convinced me she moved up here for us. Yes, us. Not me, us. And I should have been able to get in touch with him when she was at the hospital. I should have just left her at the hospital and let them figure out a way to get in touch with him to get her home. Not be there all night with 3 kids who were exhausted. My youngest was 4 years old. He had just turned 4. He was still taking naps at the time, and I'm in the hospital with them. So if you want to join the Codependency Boot Camp, early registration is until March 5th. Use podcast 35. 3/5 is the day that the early bird registration is up for 15%. And if you're a GPYB alum, don't use that. Use GPYB alum, all one word, as your discount. Send me email, Susan@gettingpastyourbreakup.com, and I will send you the registration form. If you're not interested in that, I'm going to be doing other podcasts on codependency. Please send your questions, comments. If you want to come on the podcast, I would love for somebody to come on the podcast. I've had other people. I've recorded them. I'm still editing them. I don't want to shortchange anybody, but some of them are longer than a regular podcast, so I'm trying to figure out how to split it over a couple of different episodes. Anyway, send me questions. If you want to come on the podcast, send email to meanladytalking@meanladytalking.com. We have our website. I'm going to be putting up a Patreon account very soon. I hope that you will consider supporting the podcast, supporting GPYB, so that we can continue to bring you all good stuff. This stuff does cost money to produce, and I really hope that you consider being an official part of the GPYB family. And like I said, send me questions, comments, anything. meanladytalking@meanladytalking.com. Talk to you guys soon. Take care. And hey, let's be careful out there. Talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.